What's up guys, Gray here, welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. In today's video I have an insane Stasis Hunter build to share with you guys. This build takes the new exotic trace rifle Ager's Scepter along with its brand new catalyst to the next level. But this isn't just a gimmicky one-off kind of build, you'll be able to use this all the way up to Grandmasters this season, and I'm planning on giving this build a run for its money and endgame content. It's that powerful. Not only are we taking full advantage of Ager's Scepter, a ridiculously strong new exotic, but we'll be combining it with a ton of different mods, stasis aspects, and fragments to make this a fully functioning build. But before we dive into it guys, if you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and hit that like button down below as it greatly helps out the channel and helps more people find this video, and consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more content like this. You guys have blown me away with the support here lately, over 2,000 subs in the last month, so thank you so much. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Let's start off by taking a look at the new exotic trace rifle itself, Ager's Scepter. I'm sure you've seen this by now as it's definitely the new hotness right now, but just this week the catalyst was also released, which really took this thing to the next level. The perk on this weapon is called Ager's Call, and it's pretty straightforward. Final blows with this weapon cause a slowing explosion around the target, and it's no joke. It will slow everything in a pretty large radius, and it ramps up from there, eventually freezing everything that the AoE touches. It's incredibly powerful in its own right because it gives us tons of crowd control, but it also opens up dozens of synergies with our Stasis subclass. Now the other perk on Ager's is Riga's Refrain, where any stasis final blow will instantly reload the weapon. This includes the weapon itself, so it constantly reloads itself. It's pretty crazy. The catalyst is where things start to get insane. This gives us the perk Will Given Form, and it makes it so when our super is full, we can hold reload to switch the mode of the weapon. This will cause the weapon to start draining our super energy, but in return, we will gain a massive damage increase as well as the ability to slow and freeze targets all on its own. It's like holding a freaking chaos reach in your hands that freezes enemies. It's amazing. So now that we have the ultimate stasis weapon in our hands, let's take a look at our subclass to understand what we're going to pair with this. We're going to be on Revenant Hunter today, of course, as some of the aspects for Hunter pair perfectly with Ager's. I'll recommend using Gambler's Dodge right off the bat, as this will ensure that we always have a melee available if we need it. And I'm using Duskfield Grenade because this season we have Focusing Lens on the seasonal artifact, and while we aren't using it ourselves in this build, we can greatly help out our allies who are using it by giving them a massive damage buff every time we use our grenade. The first aspect we are using is Touch of Winter, and while we're mostly using this for the 2 fragment slots it provides, it does buff all of our grenades, making them just a little bit stronger, which is always nice. But the next fragment, Grim Harvest, is what makes Hunter so perfect for this build. Grim Harvest makes it so anytime we defeat a slowed or frozen target of any kind, they will spawn a stasis shard where they died. This shard will give us some melee energy back when we pick it up, and it's going to be very central to the build a bit later. Now, as far as fragments go, we're going to start off with Whisper of Hunger, which gives us extra melee energy when we pick up those stasis shards, which is always nice. And then next, we're going to use Whisper of Fissures, which will increase the damage and size of the stasis explosion when we destroy a frozen target, which will be great for taking out big packs of mobs. Third, we're going to use Whisper of Conduction, which will simply make it so stasis shards track to us, which will definitely come in handy, especially in harder endgame content. When you can't necessarily expose yourself, they'll sort of float to you, which is really nice. We don't want to miss out on any of these shards, so this will be really important to have. And fourthly, the most important fragment is Whisper of Bonds. This grants us a huge chunk of super energy every time we defeat a frozen target. This works hand in hand with Ager's Scepter, as even when we are draining our super with the weapon, each kill we get gives us a chunk of our super back, extending the duration that we can use that powered up beam. It also helps build back our super after we drain it by using the catalyst. It's absolutely essential to the build. All of these aspects and fragments work in synergy with Ager's Scepter, but we can still do so much more. Taking a look at our exotic armor of choice, we're going to be using Star Eater Scales. Star Eater Scales gives us additional super energy every time we pick up an Orb of Power. When our super energy is full, we can overcharge our super by collecting up to 8 additional orbs for a stacking buff. Unfortunately, this doesn't do anything for the damage or functionality of Ager's Scepter, but it can greatly buff our Silence and Squall if we need it. But most importantly, we're gaining a much larger amount of super energy every time we pick up an orb. That's very crucial to note there. We're going to be constantly making orbs while we use Agers, so this is just going to add more fuel to that catalyst whenever we use it. Now let's get into the fun part, mods. We have a ton of mods to go over for this build, so feel free to skip back and listen again if you need to, but as always, I will include a comprehensive list of every combat mod you'll need at the end of this segment. The first mod on this list is absolutely insane, and it just came to the game this week, and that is Elemental Shards. This is a new stasis element combat mod that is available from the Wayfinder's Compass in the helm. This makes it so all of our elemental shards that we create now also count as elemental wells. That is actually crazy. We will literally be creating stasis shards off of almost every kill using this build, and we will have nearly 100% uptime on any elemental well mods we decide to combine with this. It's actually insane. It blows my mind that this is actually a mod. The next mod we're going to use to pair with that will be Font of Might. This is pretty straightforward. Picking up an elemental well that matches our subclass gives us a damage boost to that element for a short time. Remember, all of our shards will count for this and will translate into a constant stasis damage buff for Ager's Scepter, making it do even more damage. Next on the list will be Font of Wisdom. It functions the same as the previous mod. However, when we pick up a stasis elemental well or shard, we gain a buff that increases our super regeneration. Now, it isn't necessarily the craziest buff in the world, but combined with Whisper of Bonds and Star Eater scales, this is even more super regen, allowing us to use the catalyst on Agers even longer. Now, rounding out our regular combat mods, we will also use elemental armaments. This will make it so all of our stasis weapon final blows have a chance to spawn an actual stasis elemental well. This will just add extra consistency, as elemental shards do have a 5-second cooldown on it where the wells do not. Now next, we're going to get into some of the seasonal artifact mods we're going to be using, and our first mod off this list is in the final column, and it is Well of Potency. This one's very straightforward again. This gives us a huge chunk of super energy every time we pick up a well or stasis shard. We now have 4 separate things working to give us super energy at all times, which will give us absolutely insane uptime on our powered Agers. Like, it's actually crazy. As long as you have ads to kill, you basically can't run out of the powered up Ager Scepter. It's ridiculous. You can see some of the gameplay. I'm just standing there instantly regenerating my super and never running out of that powered up beam. It's crazy. The next artifact mod we want to use will be Thermoclastic Strike, which will make it so our stasis shurikens are now overload shurikens, and we have 2 of them at all times. It's a really nice utility to have for more in-game focused content. And then we're going to also want Resonance Siphon. This will really come in handy in in-game content, as anytime you or a fire team member stuns a champion, we get a large portion of all of our stasis abilities back. Now, if you look at my class item here, you can see I actually managed to fit 3 of these seasonal artifact mods all onto 1 armor piece. I would recommend doing it this way, as it just makes it easier. Now, we're also going to want to take Unstoppable Fusion off the artifact. We haven't quite touched on weapons yet, but we will be using a linear fusion in our heavy slot, and this will give it the added utility of making it an unstoppable weapon. The last mod off the artifact we will want will be Thermoclastic Blooming. This will make it so anytime we defeat a combatant with a stasis melee, it's going to spawn an orb of power, which will feed into our super and the Ager's catalyst. You might not always be able to fit this in depending on the champion mods you need, but if you can, definitely use it. So quite the list of mods here. Now let's get a recap up on the screen. You're going to need the following mods. You're going to need 1 Elemental Shards, 1 Font of Might, 1 Font of Wisdom, 1 Elemental Armaments, 1 Well of Potency, 1 Thermoclastic Strike, 1 Resonance Siphon, 1 Thermoclastic Blooming if you can fit it into your gear, and 1 Unstoppable Fusion along with any other champion mods you might need. All of this will be paired with Star Eater Scales and Ager Scepter to make one of the most insane stasis builds I think I have ever used. But what about our other 2 weapon slots? There is a heavy weapon that pairs perfectly with this build, and I'm sure you might have already guessed it. We're going to want to use Reed's Regret. This is the new Stasis Linear Fusion Rifle from Trials of Osiris, and it's incredibly strong with the right rolls. This triple tap Vorpal weapon roll I have is fantastic for champions and ultras. It will synergize with all of the other stasis aspects of the build as well, which makes it an even better choice for this build. Now, if you don't quite have a Reed's Regret yet, you can also use something like Threaded Needle, which is a very powerful alternative. In our energy slot, you can really use whatever you need for the content you're heading into. If you really want to be a jack of all trades, use an auto rifle and equip anti-barrier auto, and you'll have all 3 champions covered with this build. It's a really nice convenience to have, but don't be afraid to swap to whatever you might need for things like match game and certain activities. And there we have it, Guardians. Throw together this build and you'll be running around Destiny 2 like Mr. Freeze in no time. It is so much fun to play, extremely powerful, and brings a ton of utility to in-game content. It's almost like the evil twin to those crazy Vex Mythoclast builds out there, and I really hope you enjoy using it. If you guys made it this far into the video, do me a favor and leave a like down below for me and subscribe to the channel. We do builds like this all the time for both PvE and PvP, so you don't want to miss out on that. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, and I will see you next time.